Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Voyager's Dream and watched the massive space station grow larger through the viewport. The Galactic Council station was huge, bigger than most human cities, and it spun slowly around the orange star Kepler 442. The station looked like a giant crystal flower with 12 petals, each petal belonging to one of the alien species that ruled the galaxy. Jake had been making this trip for 5 years now, and each time it got harder. Each time the aliens found new ways to make humans feel small and unwanted. This time would be the last time, though Jake did not know that yet. "Captain, we're getting the usual welcome," said Lieutenant Ben Taylor from the communications station. His voice carried the tired frustration that all humans felt when dealing with the Council. "They want us to dock at Bay 94. Jake nodded. Bay 94 was the farthest dock from the Council chambers, in the section reserved for lesser species. It was a 3-hour walk through the station to reach the meeting rooms, and the aliens knew it. They did it on purpose to make humans tired before the meetings even started. "Take us in, Ben," Jake said. He turned to look at Ambassador Lisa Carter, who was reviewing her notes at a small table near the back of the bridge. Lisa had been Earth's top diplomat for 15 years, but Jake could see the stress in her face. The lines around her eyes had gotten deeper over the past year. "How bad do you think it will be this time?" Jake asked her. Lisa looked up from her papers and sighed. "Bad. The intelligence reports say they want to take 6 more colonies from us. They're also talking about putting alien watchers on all our remaining worlds." Jake felt his jaw tighten. 17 human colonies existed in the galaxy, spread across 40 light-years of space. Each one had been built with human sweat and blood. Each one housed millions of people who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. The aliens wanted to take 6 of them, just like that. "What's their reason this time?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would make him angry. "The same as always. They say humans are too aggressive and use too many resources. They say we need to be controlled before we become a threat to galactic peace." Jake walked to the viewport and stared out at the alien station. 20 years ago, when humans first joined the Galactic Council, they had been so hopeful. They thought they were joining a community of equals, working together to explore the galaxy and share knowledge. Instead, they found themselves at the bottom of a pyramid, with 12 alien species looking down on them and making rules about what humans could and could not do. At first, the rules had been small things. Humans could only trade with certain species. Human ships had to follow specific routes through space. Human colonies had to buy licenses for mining and farming. Each rule by itself seemed reasonable, but together they formed a cage that got smaller every year. The Voyager's Dream docked with a soft thud, and Jake felt the artificial gravity shift slightly as the station systems took over. "Ready, Ambassador?" he asked Lisa. Lisa gathered her papers and stood up. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but Jake had seen her face down alien diplomats twice her size without backing down. "As ready as I can be for another 3 hours of being told why humans don't deserve basic rights." They left the ship and began the long walk through the station. The corridors were designed to make humans uncomfortable. The ceilings were too high, the lights were too bright, and the air had a sharp smell that made human noses burn. Alien workers stopped to stare at them as they passed, their strange eyes filled with contempt or curiosity. The council chambers were even worse. The room was shaped like a giant bowl, with the alien representatives sitting on high platforms around the edges. The human delegation sat in the center, in chairs that were too small and placed too low. Jake had always thought it looked like a gladiator arena, with humans as the entertainment. The 12 alien species were all there. The Zephyrians looked like giant birds with blue feathers and cold yellow eyes. The Altarians were tall and thin, with gray skin and no hair. The Zentarians were the worst, with their black shells and clicking mandibles that always seemed to be laughing at some private joke. Prime Minister Vexthu of the Zephyrians called the meeting to order. His translator made his voice sound calm and reasonable, but Jake could hear the smugness underneath. The council recognizes the human delegation. You may present your case. Lisa stood up and activated her portable speaker so her voice could reach the high platforms. Honored council members, humanity requests that you reconsider the proposed restrictions on our colonies. These worlds are home to over 50 million human citizens who have lived there for generations. Taking 6 colonies would displace 20 million people and destroy communities that have existed for decades. The needs of the galaxy outweigh the desires of one species, said the Altarian representative, his flat voice showing no emotion. Humans consume resources at twice the rate of other species. Your expansion must be limited for the good of all. We've provided detailed reports showing that human colonies actually produce more resources than they consume. Lisa replied, her voice staying calm, even though Jake could see her hands shaking slightly. Our farming techniques have increased food production on 12 worlds. Our mining operations have found new deposits of rare minerals that benefit all council species. The Zentarian delegate made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Humans always speak of their contributions, but they ignore their true nature. You are a violent species that solves problems with force. Your history on Earth proves this. War after war, destruction after destruction. Jake felt heat rising in his chest, but he stayed quiet. This was Lisa's show. Every species has a violent past, Lisa said. Humans have learned from their mistakes and built a peaceful civilization. In 20 years of council membership, humans have never started a conflict with another species. Because we have not allowed you to, Vexthal said, his yellow eyes staring down at Lisa like she was an insect. Our restrictions have prevented human aggression. This proves that more restrictions are needed, not fewer. The circular logic made Jake want to scream, but he had heard it all before. Everything humans did was proof that they needed to be controlled more. If they were peaceful, it was because the aliens were controlling them properly. If they were successful, it was because they were taking resources from others. If they were unsuccessful, it was because they were inferior. The council has made its decision, announced the Altarian representative. Humans will surrender colonies at New Montana, Frontier's End, New Dublin, Harvest Moon, Steel River, and Garden World. These worlds will be redistributed to species that can use them more efficiently. Additionally, all remaining human colonies will host council peacekeepers to ensure compliance with galactic law. Lisa's face went pale. Honored council, surely we can negotiate terms. These colonies have been human homes for generations. Families will be torn apart. Children will lose the only worlds they have ever known. Lesser species do not negotiate with their superiors, the Zentarian said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. You will comply or face sanctions that will make these restrictions seem generous. That was when everything changed. The Zentarian delegate activated a large screen that showed footage from New Montana, one of the colonies they wanted to take. The images showed human children playing in wheat fields, their laughter carrying across the golden landscape. Human families sat on porches watching the sunset over farmland their grandparents had cleared by hand. Look at these future threats, the Zentarian said, his voice dripping with disgust. Young humans already learning the aggressive behaviors of their species. They must be contained before they spread their destructive nature to other worlds. Perhaps relocation to supervised facilities would benefit their development. The casual way he talked about human children, as if they were dangerous animals that needed to be caged, finally broke something inside Jake Morrison. For 20 years, humanity had swallowed insults and accepted restrictions, and tried to prove they deserved respect. For 20 years, they had followed every rule and paid every tax and smiled politely, while aliens treated them like trained pets. Jake stood up, his movement so sudden that the entire chamber fell silent. Lisa looked at him with wide eyes, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. For 20 years, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber without any need for amplification, we have tried to earn your respect. We have followed your rules, paid your taxes, and swallowed your insults. We have bent over backwards to prove that humans deserve a place in galactic civilization. The alien representatives leaned forward on their high platforms, surprised by the humans' boldness. But you have made one critical error in all your calculations, Jake continued, his eyes moving from one alien face to another. You assumed we needed you more than you needed us. Vexthol's feathers ruffled with irritation. Humans are dependent on consul trade and protection. Without us, your colonies would fail within years. Jake smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. You really believe that, don't you? The news of humanity's withdrawal spread across the galaxy like wildfire, but most aliens treated it as a joke. On the entertainment networks, Zephyrian comedians made fun of the human tantrum and predicted they would return within weeks, begging for forgiveness. Altarian news anchors discussed the inevitable collapse of human civilization without council guidance. Even serious political analysts dismissed the withdrawal as an empty threat designed to get better terms in future negotiations. But Admiral Sam Rodriguez knew better. Standing in the command center of the Liberty's Edge, humanity's largest battleship, he watched screens full of data that showed the truth. Every human vessel in the galaxy was moving, all at the same time, all heading home. It was the largest coordinated movement of ships in galactic history, and it was happening so smoothly that most aliens had not even noticed yet. Status report, Sam said to his communications officer, Lieutenant Karen Bell. All merchant vessels are responding, sir. The cargo ships are dropping their loads at the nearest neutral stations and heading back to human space. The passenger liners are completing their current runs and then returning home. Even the small courier ships are following the protocol. Sam nodded. Protocol exodus had been planned for 15 years, ever since it became clear that the aliens would never treat humans as equals. Every human captain had sealed orders that they were only supposed to open if they received the withdrawal signal. Every human company had backup plans for shutting down operations in alien space. Every human colony had contingency supplies stored away for exactly this situation. What about the research stations? Sam asked. Dr. Maria Santos is coordinating the shutdown from Terra Nova. All research facilities are being evacuated. The scientists are taking their personal equipment, but leaving everything else behind. Dr. Maria Santos sat in her office on Terra Nova, humanity's capital world, surrounded by screens showing evacuation progress from across the galaxy. As head of the Human Colonial Administration, she was responsible for coordinating the withdrawal of over 2 million human civilians from alien space. It was the biggest logistical challenge in human history, but they had been preparing for it for years. How are we doing on the medical stations? She asked her assistant, Dr. Paul Green. All human doctors are packing up their personal equipment and medical supplies. They're leaving the alien-built facilities intact, but taking anything that belongs. To them, the hospital on Altara Prime is going to lose 60% of its medical staff. Maria felt a twinge of guilt about that. Human doctors had been working on alien worlds for decades, treating patients and saving lives. But the aliens had made their choice when they decided humans were too dangerous to be trusted with basic rights. What about the engineering teams? That's where it gets interesting, Paul said, pulling up a new screen. Our people have been maintaining critical infrastructure on dozens of alien worlds. Power plants, water treatment facilities, transportation networks, communication systems. They're all finishing their current work orders and then leaving. Are they training replacements? Paul shook his head. The withdrawal orders are specific. Complete current assignments, pack personal equipment, return home. No training, no transition periods, no detailed handovers. Meanwhile, in a small cantina, on the edge of Zephyrian space, Lieutenant Commander Ben Taylor sat nursing a drink and watching the alien patrons with growing interest. Ben was officially a human trade representative, but his real job was intelligence gathering. He had spent 5 years on this station, building relationships and learning secrets, and now he was finally seeing the first cracks in alien confidence. Did you hear about the shipping consortium? Asked Grix, a Velcaran trader who had been Ben's drinking buddy for 3 years. The Velcarans looked like giant otters with purple fur, and were usually the most cheerful species in the galaxy. But Grix looked worried tonight. What about them? Ben asked, though he already knew the answer. 30% of their fleet just disappeared. Turns out all those ships were human-owned, leased through some complicated legal arrangements. The humans just terminated all the leases at once. Now the consortium can't move cargo between the outer realm worlds. Ben nodded sympathetically while hiding his smile. The Velcaran Shipping Consortium was one of the biggest companies in the galaxy, but they had gotten lazy over the years. Instead of building their own ships, they had found it cheaper to lease human vessels. Now they were learning the cost of that decision. It gets worse, Grix continued. The ships they do own are having maintenance problems. Turns out human technicians have been doing most of the repair work for the past decade. The Velcarans know how to pilot ships, but they never learned how to fix the complex systems. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening as the first week of the withdrawal came to an end. On the industrial world of Proxima Forge, factory manager Kexmar was staring at production reports that made no sense. His automated assembly lines were running at 70% efficiency, down from their normal 95%. The quantum processors that controlled the machinery were having calibration problems, and the Altarian technicians could not figure out why. When did this start? Kexmar asked his chief engineer. About 5 days ago, sir. Right around the time the human maintenance team left. Kexmar felt a cold knot form in his stomach. I thought our people could handle the maintenance. We thought. So too, sir. But these quantum processors were designed by Genesis Technologies, a human company. The manuals are all written in human technical language, and even with translators, we can't understand half of it. The concepts themselves seem to require some kind of intuitive understanding that only humans have. Similar problems were emerging on worlds across the galaxy. The Zentarian military base on Kepler Station lost its advanced radar system when the human technicians who maintained it packed up and left. The environmental controls on the Zephyrian colony world of New Paradise began malfunctioning without the human engineers who had installed them 50 years earlier. Even simple things like water purification plants and power generators started having problems without human maintenance crews. But the aliens were still convinced that humans would come crawling back. On the council station, Prime Minister Vexthul called an emergency session to discuss the human crisis. This tantrum has gone on long enough, he announced to the assembled representatives. We must send a message to the humans that their behavior is unacceptable. I propose we freeze all human assets in council space and ban them from returning until they formally apologize. The Altarian representative agreed. Humans must learn that actions have consequences. Their withdrawal is causing minor inconveniences, but nothing we cannot handle. In a few months, when their colonies start running out of supplies, they will realize their mistake. The Zentarian delegate was less optimistic. Our intelligence reports suggest that human colonies have been stockpiling supplies for years. They may be able to survive longer than we expected. Impossible, Vextel said. Humans are dependent on council trade networks. Without access to rare minerals and advanced technologies from other species, their civilization will stagnate and collapse. But even as the council members reassured each other, reports were coming in from across the galaxy that suggested the withdrawal was more serious than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Stock Exchange had dropped 15% in 1 week, as companies realized how much of their operations depended on human workers and human technology. Medical facilities were postponing surgeries because they could not get replacement parts for human-designed equipment. Universities were canceling research projects because their human scientists had packed up their laboratories and gone home. The situation became critical when the council station itself began experiencing problems. The artificial gravity fluctuated for 3 hours on Tuesday, causing several alien delegates to become violently sick. The communication arrays that allowed real-time contact with member worlds started having interference problems. Even the water recycling system began producing liquid that tasted strange and smelled worse. What is causing these malfunctions? Vextel demanded of the station's chief engineer, an Altarian named Kexter. Sir, we are investigating, but the problems seem to be connected to systems that were upgraded with human technology over the past 20 years. The artificial gravity generators use human-designed stabilizers. The communication arrays use human quantum amplifiers. The life support system uses human filtration technology. Can we repair these systems ourselves? Kexter hesitated. We are trying, sir, but human engineering is very different from our approaches. They design systems to be adaptable and intuitive, while we prefer rigid logical structures. Without human technicians to maintain the equipment, we are having difficulty understanding how to fix problems. As the second week of the withdrawal began, the first cracks in alien confidence were starting to show. Captain Jane Cooper, a human freighter pilot who had stayed behind to help evacuate stranded human civilians, watched the growing chaos from Phaia, Haven's Rest, a neutral trading station. Alien merchants who used to look down on human traders were now approaching her with increasingly desperate offers. 6 months after the human withdrawal, the galaxy was falling apart, and everyone could see it now. What had started as minor inconveniences had grown into major crises that threatened entire worlds. The aliens were no longer laughing about the human tantrum, because there was nothing funny about watching their civilization crumble piece by piece. On Proxima Forge, the industrial heart of the Altarian Republic, factory supervisor Kexmar stood in his empty production facility and tried not to panic. The massive assembly lines that had once built starships and orbital platforms sat silent and dark. The quantum processors that ran everything had failed one by one over the past month, and his engineers still could not figure out how to fix them. Sir, we've tried everything, his chief engineer reported, his gray skin looking even paler than usual. We've replaced the power cores, rebuilt the circuitry, even brought in technical experts from the core worlds. Nothing works. Kexmar walked over to one of the dead processors and stared at it. The machine was the size of a small building, filled with components that defied understanding. The human company Genesis Technologies had installed these systems 15 years ago, and they had run perfectly ever since. Now they were just expensive decorations. What do the manuals say? He asked, though he already knew the answer. The technical documentation is in human language, sir. Even with our best translation programs, we can only understand about half of it. The other half uses concepts and terms that don't exist in any alien language. It's like they think about technology in a completely different way. That was the problem, Kexmar realized. Humans didn't just build machines. They created systems that could adapt and grow and fix themselves. Alien engineering was logical and predictable, following strict rules that never changed. Human engineering was alive somehow, designed to handle problems that hadn't even been invented yet. The door to the factory opened, and a government official entered, his expensive robes looking out of place in the industrial setting. Supervisor Kexmar, the Republic needs this facility operational immediately. We have military contracts that must be fulfilled. I understand, Minister, but we can't fix what we don't understand. These machines were designed by human minds, and without human technicians, they're just very expensive scrap metal. The minister's face darkened. Then hire human technicians. We've tried, sir. The humans aren't responding to any communications from Council member species. They've cut us off completely. Across the galaxy on Zephyr Prime, the situation was even worse. Prime Minister Vexthal stood on his office balcony and watched storm clouds gathering over the capital city. For 50 years, Zephyr Prime had enjoyed perfect weather thanks to atmospheric control systems installed by human engineers. The planet's 3 moons created chaotic weather patterns that would have made the world uninhabitable without technological intervention. But the weather control systems were failing, and nobody knew how to fix them. The backup systems were failing, too, because they were also human-designed. Category 5 hurricanes were forming over the ocean, and the planetary defense grid that should have dispersed them was offline for maintenance that only humans knew how to perform. How long do we have? Vexthal asked his science advisor, Dr. Yixandra. The main storm will reach the capital in 18 hours, sir. Wind speeds are already over 200 kilometers per hour, and they're still increasing. We're evacuating the coastal cities, but there are 60 million people in the storm's path. Vexthal felt his feathers bristling with anxiety. What about the orbital platforms? Can they provide weather modification from space? No, sir. The orbital systems are controlled by the same computer networks that are failing planetside. We think the humans designed everything to work together as one integrated system. We've been treating it as separate pieces, but it's actually one giant machine that we don't understand. The irony was bitter. Vexthal had spent years talking about human intellectual inferiority and their inability to think logically. Now he was discovering that human engineering was so advanced that his best scientists couldn't even comprehend how it worked. On the neutral trading station Haven's Rest, Captain Jane Cooper was watching the slow collapse of galactic commerce with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The main trading floor, which used to buzz with activity from dozens of species, was now mostly empty. Half the merchant vessels that used to dock here regularly had been human-owned or human-operated. The other half were having maintenance problems because their crews didn't know how to fix human-built components. Captain Cooper called out Merchant Zixtal, hurrying across the trading floor with desperation in his yellow eyes. Please, I need your help. My cargo ship has been drifting for 3 days. The navigation computer keeps crashing, and my engineers can't figure out why. Jane looked at the Zephyrian trader, who used to treat her like a second-class citizen. 6 months ago, Zixtal would barely acknowledge her existence. Now he was begging for assistance. What kind of navigation computer? She asked. Human-made. A Stellar Dynamics Model 7 with quantum processing upgrades. The error messages are all in human technical language that makes no sense when translated. Jane knew that model well. It was a beautiful piece of engineering that could plot courses through hyperspace with incredible precision. But it was also designed to learn from its mistakes and adapt to new situations, which meant it needed occasional guidance from someone who understood its personality. Sorry, Zixtal. I'm not in the repair business anymore. I can pay 10 times the normal rate, 20 times. My cargo is medical supplies for the colony at Kepler 7. People will die if I can't deliver them. Jane felt a stab of guilt, but she pushed it away. The aliens had created this situation by treating humans like dangerous animals. If people were suffering now, that was the consequence of their leaders' choices. Dr. Amanda Price sat in her monitoring station on Earth and watched the galactic communication networks slowly fall apart. Her job was tracking alien messages and looking for patterns, but there weren't many messages to track anymore. The hyperspace communication relays that connected distant worlds were failing one by one, and the aliens couldn't fix them. Status. Report, requested Admiral Rodriguez from his office on Terra Nova. It's getting worse every day, sir. The Velcaran Consortium has officially filed for bankruptcy. 3 major shipping companies have suspended all operations. The Galactic Stock Exchange has dropped 60% since the withdrawal began. What? About government communications? Spotty at best. The Council is having trouble maintaining contact with member worlds because the communication networks depended heavily on human maintenance. Some of the outer colonies haven't been heard from in weeks. Amanda pulled up a star chart showing the galaxy's communication network. Red dots marked failed relay stations, and there were far too many of them. The network that had once connected thousands of worlds was developing huge gaps, leaving entire sectors isolated. Sir, we're also detecting unusual military movements. It looks like some species are mobilizing their fleets, but we can't tell if it's for defense or if they're planning to try forcing us back into service. On the Council station itself, the situation had become desperate. Emergency sessions were being held daily as infrastructure continued to fail. The artificial gravity fluctuated randomly, making it dangerous to move around the station. The life support systems produced air that smelled like sulfur and tasted like metal. Even the lights flickered constantly, casting strange shadows in the council chambers. Vexthul called another emergency meeting, but only half the delegates could attend because their personal shuttles were having mechanical problems. The meeting was held in environmental suits because nobody trusted the air recycling system anymore. We must acknowledge the obvious, announced the Altarian representative, his voice distorted by his suit's communication system. The human withdrawal is causing catastrophic damage to our infrastructure. We need them back. Impossible, declared the Zenturian delegate, though his usual arrogance was missing. We cannot appear weak by begging for their return. It would undermine our authority with other species. What authority? Asked the Velcaran representative bitterly. Half my people are starving because we can't transport food to the outer colonies. Our ships are breaking down faster than we can repair them. Our factories have stopped producing goods because the machinery is too advanced for us to operate. The room fell silent as the aliens faced the truth they had been avoiding. For 20 years, they had convinced themselves that humans were inferior, that they needed alien guidance and control. Now they were discovering that human technology, human knowledge, and human workers had become essential to galactic civilization. There has to be a solution, Vexthul said desperately. We are intelligent species with thousands of years of advancement. Surely we can adapt to function without human assistance. The Altarian representative activated a holographic display showing industrial output across the galaxy. The numbers were devastating. Manufacturing was down 70%. Agricultural production had dropped 40%. Even basic services like waste management and water treatment were failing on dozens of worlds. 1 year after humanity walked away, the galaxy was begging them to come back. The proud aliens who had once called humans inferior were now sending desperate messages offering anything and everything if humans would just return to fix the mess they had left behind. But the humans were not answering, and every day the situation got worse. On Zephyr Prime, the storms had finally arrived. Prime Minister Vexthul stood in his emergency bunker deep underground and listened to reports from the surface. The hurricane that had been building for weeks had finally hit the capital city with winds over 300 kilometers per hour. Without the weather control systems that humans had built, the storm was free to rage across the planet like an angry god. How many casualties? He asked his emergency coordinator, trying to keep his voice steady. Initial reports suggest over 2,000 dead and 50,000 missing, sir. The coastal cities are completely destroyed. The orbital evacuation platforms are offline, so we can't get people off the planet. Vexthul closed his yellow eyes and tried not to think about the irony. For years, he had given speeches about how humans were too emotional and violent to be trusted with important responsibilities. Now his own people were dying because they had rejected the humans who could have prevented this disaster. What about the other council species? Can they provide assistance? Everyone is dealing with their own crises, sir. The Altarians have lost contact with half their colonies because their communication networks have failed. The Zentarians are facing food shortages because their agricultural systems are breaking down. Nobody has resources to spare. Meanwhile, in the research laboratories of Altara University, Dr. Zixthara was leading a team of the galaxy's best. Scientists in a desperate attempt to understand human technology. They had been working for 8 months to reverse engineer a simple human medical scanner, the kind that every human doctor carried in their basic kit. The device could diagnose hundreds of conditions in seconds and suggest treatments with incredible accuracy. Report, she said to her research team, though she already knew what they would tell her. We can identify 90% of the components, doctor, said her assistant, Dr. Kicksmall. We understand the basic scanning functions and the data processing systems, but we cannot figure out how it makes diagnostic decisions. Zixthara picked up the human device and turned it over in her gray hands. It was smaller than an Altarian medical scanner, but far more capable. The aliens had been trying to copy it for months, but their attempts produced machines that were 10 times larger and barely functional. The problem is the decision-making. Algorithms, Kicksmall continued. Human medical scanners don't just follow programmed instructions. They seem to learn from each patient and adapt their responses. They use intuitive analysis that we cannot reproduce. Intuitive analysis is not scientific, Zixthara said automatically, repeating what she had been taught her entire career. Medical diagnosis must follow logical procedures based on established data. Yes, doctor, but the humans somehow make intuitive analysis work better than our logical procedures. Their scanners are right 97% of the time. Ours are right 71% of the time. That was the problem with everything human, Zixthara realized. Humans didn't build technology the way other species did. They created machines that could think and adapt and grow, almost like living creatures. The aliens had always dismissed this as primitive and unscientific, but now they were discovering that human primitive technology was more advanced than anything they could build. On the war-torn world of Zentari Beta, General Rexvar watched his fortress lose power for the 4th time this week. The backup generators were human-manufactured, purchased decades ago, because they were more reliable than anything the Zentarians could build. But without human maintenance, the generators were failing one by one. Sir, we have a problem, reported his aide, clicking his mandibles nervously. The planetary defense grid has gone offline. If the rebels attack now, we have no way to protect the capital. Rexvar felt his shell tighten with stress. Zentari Beta had been fighting a civil war for 3 years, but the superior technology of the government forces had kept the rebels contained. Most of that superior technology was human-built, and now it was falling apart. What about the orbital weapons platforms? Also offline, sir. The targeting computers were upgraded with human systems 5 years ago. We can't operate them manually because the interfaces were designed for human hands and human thinking patterns. The rebellion that had been slowly losing ground for years was suddenly winning because the government's technological advantage was disappearing. Rexvar had always prided himself on Zentarian military superiority, but now he was learning that much of that superiority had come from human engineering. Captain Lisa Reed was making one of her rare trips through alien space, carrying humanitarian supplies to refugee camps on neutral worlds. Her ship was officially on a mercy mission, but her real job was intelligence gathering. What she saw confirmed humanity's worst fears about what the withdrawal was doing to innocent civilians. The refugee camp on Harmony Station is overflowing, she reported to Admiral Rodriguez via encrypted communication. There are over 1 million people there, mostly civilians who fled worlds where the infrastructure collapsed. They're living in temporary shelters with minimal food and medical care. What about the local governments? Are they providing assistance? They can't, sir. The local governments are barely functioning themselves. Harmony Station's life support systems are failing, but they can't get replacement parts because the factories that made them have shut down. It's a cascade failure across the entire galactic economy. Lisa had mixed feelings about what she was seeing. Part of her felt terrible for the suffering civilians who had done nothing wrong except live under governments that treated humans badly. But another part of her was grimly satisfied that the aliens were finally learning the cost of their arrogance. On Earth, President Ellen Davis was meeting with her cabinet to discuss the flood of requests that were coming in from alien governments. Every day brought new messages offering increasingly desperate terms for human assistance. The Velcaran Consortium had offered to give humans equal ownership of their entire shipping fleet. The Altarian Republic had promised to make humans full voting members of their government. Even the proud Zentarians had secretly offered to pay reparations for past discrimination. What's the latest offer? Asked Secretary of State Robert Lane. The Galactic Council is willing to restructure completely, reported Intelligence Director Carol Smith. They're offering humans permanent seats on all major committees, veto power over new regulations, and guaranteed representation equal to any other species. That's more than we ever asked for when we were members, noted Defense Secretary Mark Johnson. President Davis nodded. They're offering us everything we wanted 20 years ago. The question is whether we should take it. The humanitarian situation is getting worse every day, warned Secretary Lane. Our intelligence reports suggest that several worlds are facing complete societal collapse. Millions of innocent people are suffering because their leaders made bad decisions. And if we go back now, what happens in 10 years when they forget this lesson? Asked Secretary Johnson. They'll start treating us badly again, except this time they'll be more careful to hide their dependence on us. Dr. Amanda Price was documenting the collapse from her monitoring station, watching as alien governments tried increasingly desperate measures to solve their problems. The Zephyrians had attempted to hire mercenary technicians from neutral species, but nobody understood human technology well enough to be helpful. The Altarians had tried to build replacement systems using their own designs, but their equipment was too primitive to handle the complex tasks that human technology had been performing. Sir, we're seeing something new, she reported to Admiral Rodriguez. The 3 most powerful alien species are talking to each other through secure channels. It looks like they're planning some kind of joint statement. What kind of statement? We're not sure yet, but the communication patterns suggest it's going to be something unprecedented. The Zephyrians, Altarians, and Zentarians have never cooperated on anything before. The joint statement came 3 days later, broadcast simultaneously across every communication network in the galaxy. The 3 species that had led the discrimination against humans stood together for the first time in galactic history to deliver a message that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. To the human people, began Prime Minister Vextho, his proud voice now filled with humility. We acknowledge that we have made grave errors in our treatment of your species. For too long, we allowed prejudice and fear to cloud our judgment. We believed that humans were inferior and needed our guidance, continued the Altarian representative. We now understand that this belief was not only wrong, but destructive. Human innovation and dedication were essential to our civilization, and we failed to recognize or appreciate these contributions. The Zentarian delegate spoke last, and his words carried the weight of a species that had never admitted weakness before. We treated humans as servants rather than partners, as problems, to be managed rather than people to be respected. 2 years after humanity walked away from galactic society, President Ellen Davis stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Terra Nova and prepared to make the most important decision in human history. The chamber was filled with representatives from every human colony, military leaders, scientists, and ordinary citizens who had lived through the withdrawal. Outside, the galaxy waited for humanity's answer to their desperate pleas for reconciliation. We have 3 choices, President Davis said to the assembled crowd. We can stay isolated and continue building our own civilization without alien interference. We can return to the galaxy on the terms they've offered, accepting their apologies and restructured government. Or we can propose our own terms for a completely new relationship. Admiral Sam Rodriguez stepped forward from his seat in the front row. Madam President, isolation has served us well. Our colonies are more self-sufficient than ever before. Our technology has advanced rapidly without alien interference. Our people are united in ways they never were when we were trying to please alien masters. Dr. Maria Santos raised her hand to speak. But isolation has costs too, Admiral. We've lost access to resources and knowledge from dozens of alien species. Our scientific progress has slowed in some areas because we no longer have access to alien research. And most importantly, millions of innocent aliens are suffering because we withdrew our help. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some speakers argued that humanity owed the aliens nothing after 20 years of discrimination and abuse. Others pointed out that humans had always been builders and helpers, and walking away from people in need went against human nature. Still others worried that returning too quickly would teach the aliens that humans could be bullied into submission and then welcomed back whenever it was convenient. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, finally stood to address the chamber. He was the man who had spoken the words that started the withdrawal, and everyone wanted to hear his thoughts on ending it. 2 years ago, I told the aliens that they had made a critical error, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. They assumed we needed them more than they needed us. The past 2 years have proven that assumption wrong. He activated a holographic display showing economic and social data from across the galaxy. The numbers painted a picture of civilizations in decline, struggling to maintain basic functions without human assistance. But we also learned something about ourselves during the withdrawal. We learned that we are stronger than we thought, more capable than the aliens ever gave us credit for, and more united than we had ever been before. We proved that humans don't need to beg for respect because we can command it through our actions. The chamber erupted in applause, but Morrison raised his hand for silence. However, we also learned that isolation is not a permanent solution. Humans are explorers and builders. We are meant to be part of something larger than ourselves. The question is not whether we should return to galactic society, but how we return and what kind of society we help create. President Davis nodded and activated her own display, showing the alien proposals that had been flooding in for months. The Galactic Council has offered us everything we asked for 20 years ago and more. Equal representation, veto power over major decisions, guaranteed rights for human colonies, and formal protections against discrimination. But is that enough? Asked Dr. Kevin Walsh from his seat near the back. They're offering us equality within the same system that oppressed us for 20 years. What happens when they decide equality is too generous? Ambassador Lisa Carter stood up, and the chamber fell quiet. She had been humanity's voice during the darkest days of alien prejudice, and her opinion carried enormous weight. "I've spent my career trying to earn alien respect through diplomacy and compromise," she said. "I believe that if we just worked hard enough and proved ourselves worthy enough, they would eventually accept us as equals. The withdrawal taught me that respect cannot be earned through submission." She walked to the center of the chamber, her small frame commanding attention from hundreds of people. "The aliens are not offering us equality because they've learned to respect us. They're offering it because they need us to fix their broken civilization. That's not respect, that's desperation. If we return on their terms, we'll be back to the same relationship we had before, except with better contracts." "So what do you propose?" asked President Davis. "We return to galactic society, but we don't return to the Galactic Council. We create something new, something built on genuine equality and mutual respect, rather than hierarchy and dominance." The chamber buzzed with conversation as people discussed this radical proposal. For centuries, the Galactic Council had been the only form of interstellar government anyone could imagine. The idea of replacing it seemed almost impossible. Dr. Amanda Price, who had been monitoring alien communications throughout the withdrawal, stood to share her intelligence. "The aliens are desperate enough to agree to almost anything. Their governments are failing, their economies are collapsing, and their people are suffering. If we propose dissolving the council and starting over, they would probably accept it. But would that be fair to them?" asked Dr. Santos. "They're asking for our help, not our conquest." Morrison smiled at that. "We're not talking about conquest, Doctor. We're talking about building something better than what came before." The Galactic Council was based on the idea that some species were naturally superior to others. Any new organization would be based on the idea that all species have value and deserve respect. President Davis called for a formal vote on 3 options. First, permanent isolation from galactic society. Second, return to the galaxy under the terms offered by the aliens. Third, propose the creation of a new galactic organization based on true equality. The vote was not even close. 91% of the human representatives voted for the third option. Humanity would return to the galaxy, but they would not return to the old system that had treated them as second-class citizens. 3 days later, Admiral Morrison found himself back in a council chamber, but this time it was different. The chamber was on the neutral world of Harmony Station, and the seating was arranged in a circle with all species at the same level. No one sat higher than anyone else, and no species was given a position of privilege. Representatives from all 12 alien species were present, along with delegations from 6 neutral worlds that had never joined the original council. The humans were not returning as supplicants begging for readmission. They were coming as partners in creating something entirely new. The Terran Federation proposes the dissolution of the Galactic Council and the creation of a new organization, Morrison announced to the assembled delegates. This new alliance would be based on principles of equality, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. A reaction was immediate acceptance from every alien government. They agreed without negotiation or discussion, desperate to end the isolation that had brought their civilizations to the brink of collapse. But Morrison continued with conditions that would ensure this alliance was different from what came before. All member species will have equal representation regardless of size or technological advancement. No species will have permanent veto power over others. Decisions affecting any member world must be made with full consultation and consent from that world's government. He looked around the circle at faces that had once sneered at human requests for basic fairness. Most importantly, this alliance will have formal protections against discrimination and mechanisms for any species to withdraw if they are being treated unfairly. The aliens agreed to every condition without question. They had learned the hard way what happened when essential partners were pushed too far. Over the following months, human ships began returning to alien space, and human workers began repairing the damage that 2 years of neglect had caused. But this time, they came as equals rather than servants. Human colonies were no longer subject to alien oversight. Human technology was shared through partnership agreements rather than seized through regulations. Human voices carried the same weight as any other species in the new Galactic Alliance. Dr. Walsh returned to his research station, now expanded and jointly operated by teams from multiple species. As he watched human and alien scientists working together on projects that would benefit everyone, he made a note in his personal log. "They pushed us until we walked away," he wrote. "Now they know we can do it again. More importantly, we know we can do it again. That knowledge has changed everything. We are no longer asking for respect. We are demanding it. And for the first time in galactic history, we are getting it." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would not soon be forgotten. Respect could not be demanded or legislated. It had to be earned through fair treatment and mutual cooperation. The species that forgot this lesson would find themselves isolated and abandoned, just as the old council had been. Humanity had walked away when pushed too far, proving that they were strong enough to stand alone. Now they had returned, not as grateful servants, but as equal partners in building a better galaxy for everyone. The old hierarchy was dead, replaced by something that recognized the value and dignity of all intelligent life.